Thank you, band. Good morning, church. How's everyone doing? Good. I'm glad. My name is Zach, and I'm super excited to be here with you this morning. As mentioned already, our beloved Pastor Keith and his family, the Paquettes, they are out west mourning the loss of Keith's mother-in-law, but also Lacey's mom. So with that being said, we're thinking of them and praying of them. But you get me this morning, which is good. So I'm excited to be here. And I remember before coming out here to work here at Sheridan Park Church, I worked at the Calgary Drop-In Center, and it's an emergency shelter for the homeless population in Calgary. And I remember when I first started there, I was so not respected. People, they did not like me. People were cussing me out, calling me names, threatening my beautiful fiance at the time. But that's just the way it was. They did not respect me in the authority of the position that I held and that I had in that role. And so I didn't start off in that job with people respecting me. And, when I came on staff, the clients were immediately on the defense with me speaking into their lives, and they assumed I was going to abuse my authority with the position that I held, and most of the time, they actually pretended that I didn't exist. And so I had to build a relationship while I was there that was based off of an authority that was trusting, authentic, and loving. And it was there in the environment of the drop-in center where I saw this attitude of authority being linked as a bad thing, as a negative thing, and to the people attached to it. Now, the word authority has a nasty sound to it, doesn't it? Every time, I hear the word authority, or maybe even if you hear the word authority, you're just like, that does not sound good. Well, the word authority actually means this. In fact, it's the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. Imagine having that over your life. It sounds just yucky and gross. But in the place of the DI, clients started to recognize that I actually wasn't giving up and that I continued to come back shift after shift after shift. And it was in that moment when clients started to realize that I wasn't like other staff. And I'm not saying all staff are like that. I'm not saying everybody who has a role of authority abuses it. But there are circumstances and there is places where people can abuse their authority. But they started to realize and that they saw someone who cared for them and used their authority for the way that it was supposed to be used for and designed for. And you know what? I can totally understand why people are weary of authority, because I have seen it firsthand be abused in the lives of vulnerable people. And I can almost guarantee at some point in our lives, we have all had an experience here in this room today where we have been hurt by authority, or maybe we don't like certain points or parts of authority in our lives because maybe we've had it used over us in a negative way. And we've all met those types of people that have authority in our lives. And, at first you could fear them because maybe all you've experienced or heard is the horror stories of them abusing their power. But when you actually get to know the person behind the title and spend more time with them, they are so loving and have their best interests at heart. Some authority figures in our lives could be police officers. It could be pastors even. It could be tax auditors, judges, teachers, parents, doctors. There's lots of places and spaces for people that have authority in this world. Because if we can be honest, it's this, is that authority equals scary. Authority equals intimidation. Authority equals scary. And so I know we can all feel this way at certain times in our lives, but is it possible, and this is the question I want to throw out today, is it possible that maybe there's another category for how we see authority in our lives, especially as Christians, if you call yourself and you identify with that word today? There are two types of people in our lives that have authority. There's one, those that abuse their authority. And there's two, those that use their authority for the common good and that can be trusted with the power and authority over your life to see you succeed. And so the real issue is a false understanding of authority that has been tainted. It's been tainted through our eyes and our situations in which we've been in. And so there are certain people and professionals and professions that have authority, and we need to see them in a new way. We need to look at the motives behind authority. More often than not, especially since moving here to the GTA, I find when I talk to people, and I love to just chat with people, meet people on the streets, ask them how they're doing or whatever, and it always comes to this question. They say, "So Zach, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a pastor," and automatically the walls of defense go up. And I find that fascinating. Not everyone's like that. Not everyone is like that, but as I've talked with people and I continue to dialogue with more and more people, somewhere along their story they've been hurt by the church, they've been hurt by a Christian, or something that has to do with Christianity, and they're guarded in their lives. But friends, listen closely. When I read the Bible, and I want to invite you to enter into the Bible on your own time and what that looks like for you, but when I read the Bible, and when I read about this man named Jesus, nowhere do I find him pushing his authority out of vengeance, out of anger, out of manipulation onto other people. You won't find it. I don't know what your experience is with faith, but again, when I open the Bible, I see a man who taught with authority, even though he didn't have much authority, and what people assumed authority looked like in that time, and even today. Jesus never swung a sword. He never rode a white horse into battle, and yet people wanted to know him, and people listened to him. Because we know this because he was different. And it says in the scriptures, in verses like Mark 1:22, it says, "The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law." Matthew 7:29 says this, "Because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law." Fascinating. Jesus was an authoritative figure, and this blew people's minds because he didn't use and abuse it like the authority figures they had in their lives. Yet they saw a figure of authority that came into the world and didn't leverage authority in which people were used to. It's different. It's different, and it's loving, and it's kind. And so today, my hope is that you may experience and see an authority that was meant to be loving and not hurtful. If we want to know the true character of God, we need to understand and look to the person of Jesus. There's something there that's different than maybe what we may have known or have known in our lives. And so I want to create space for a new understanding and a way of thinking of authority in our lives, especially when it comes to the person of Jesus. Because this is what Jesus did all the time. He created space for dialogue to be had with people, to talk and experience without forcing them into something. He was constantly having dialogue, and the story we're going to look at today does exactly that. It's a moment in time where a man will never forget what true, loving authority looks like from God in the person of Jesus. So we're going to be looking into the book of Mark today, chapter 8, verses 22 to 26. And I want to invite you to follow along. It's up on the screen there, and we're going to work through this together, and we're going to see and look at this person named Jesus. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home saying, "Don't even go into the village." As we start off, we see this first verse saying that they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. The first thing that we see in this type of authority that's found in Jesus' name is that it's very accepting. Jesus' authority is accepting. This bit right here shows us that the God of this universe is so accepting and loving of his children that he created. Jesus is the type of guy where he's continually walking and entering into people's lives at different situations, at different moments, space and places and times where people are at on their journey. Jesus is continually walking and entering people's lives, no matter what you may have looked like, no matter who you are, no matter your background, no matter where you've been, no matter where you're going. Jesus enters in and he talks with you and he wants to get to know you and he accepts you with where you're at. But to understand the power of this passage, we need to understand how these people in this time were raised in this culture. Because in every culture, there's context behind what we do and why we do it. There was a tradition of touching. Again, we're going to be looking at touching. There was a tradition of touching in this time, and it was mostly used for three authoritative reasons. One being the dedication of sacrifice, the installing of priests, and blessings. Religious leaders would not even dare to touch the sick, frail, or lame, or broken. In fact, their authority in this time was to send the sick away where they could not be seen, where they would not make noise or cause any issues in the public realm. In fact, we see this again in verses or in passage like Numbers 5:2. It says, "Command the Israelites to send away from the camp anyone who has a defiling skin disease or a discharge of any kind, or who is ceremonially unclean because of a dead body." 2 Kings 7:3 says this, "Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, 'Why stay here until we die?'" People who had any deformity or couldn't offer anything to society were pushed aside. So if you've lived in that culture and you understood sickness and disease, the last person you would want to bring a sick or injured person to was a religious leader, somebody who held high authority standing in that time. And yet some people knew who Jesus was, and they heard about this person. There's this guy named Jesus, and he's different, and he can change your life. He can do something for you. And they wanted to take their friend there. I find it very fascinating that this man's friends were the ones that brought him to Jesus. And it makes me wonder why, if the guy wanted to be better, why didn't he just get up and go to Jesus himself? Why didn't he go see Jesus himself? Why did it have to take his friends to take him to go see Jesus? And it makes me wonder if at the beginning why the man didn't want to go to Jesus himself, because again, all he knows is that authority equals scary. Maybe he's been kicked out. Maybe he's been tossed aside. Maybe he's been left behind. But in Jesus' time, and even before that, a lot of their culture was built around sacred things. In the Old Testament, there was this place called the tabernacle. And the tabernacle, literally in the Hebrew language, translates to the dwelling place of God. When this tabernacle was in the Hebrews' people's mind, was a portable earthly meeting place with God. God dwelled in that place. It was a physical place in space, and only the people of holy standing could enter in to be with God. Think about it as like the best country golf club in Toronto. If you suck, sorry, get out of here. You're not welcome. Only you can come who's the elite, who's the best, who's the cleanest, who looks like they have it all together. That's sacred. Sacred meaning holy and set apart. Therefore, only the holy can enter in. But now I want to introduce you to a word called profane. And profane meaning this is to treat something sacred with disrespect. So someone who is not holy, not clean, who doesn't have it all together, who's sinful, and enters a holy place like the tabernacle, that is a big no-no. No, you do not do that. Yet, friends, listen closely. I really want to hit this point home today. Jesus, in this new type of authority that we're looking at today, Jesus in his authority brings the sacred to the profane. The Creator steps into relationship with his creation, no matter what it looks like, no matter where it's been, no matter how many struggles it has had, how many struggles you and I live in, or what we have. Jesus brings the sacred to the profane. Because the bottom line is this, is that Jesus' authority is accepting. He says, come as you are, but let's journey so you don't have to stay as you once were. As we continue, he took the blind man by the hand and led him outside of the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" The next thing we learn about Jesus' authority is that it's intimate. Jesus' authority is intimate. Now, I just want to be real and just acknowledge the elephant in the room, that Jesus totally hawked a loogie and spit in this dude's face. Isn't that, like, how intimate is that? He took this blind dude out into the woods and spit on him. Like, that's like, what? It's so bizarre, and I'm not going to lie to anybody here today. I have no idea why he did that. I don't know. I mean, there's people, there's different ideas of why Jesus did that. I have no idea, and it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre, but it has an element of authority that was so countercultural within that time. Remember, authority came from rules, regulations, having to do all the right things, and now Jesus comes onto the scene, meets this sick guy where he's at, physically leads him by the hand into the country land, and spits on him. You know, I think that this has nothing to do with what Jesus is doing, yet it has everything to do with who he is and who he is connected to, who is God the Father. It's intimate. Imagine having dirty, calloused hands, you know, all up in your face, spitting on you. The authority of the religious leaders' hand gestures was go, but the authority of Jesus' hand gestures was I'm coming to you. It's intimate. You know, in this miracle, Jesus is asking questions. He says, "Do you see anything?" He's physically spending time one-on-one with this man. He's creating an atmosphere of intimacy out in the middle of the woods. This is an authority that was so different within that time, even within our time. He's creating an atmosphere, and this is authoritative, but authority executed through love. As the man spends, more time with Jesus, and this miracle starts to take place over the span of what seems like a couple of hours, he's starting to come into his senses almost of who he's spending time with. And the questions in which Jesus asks create space for the man to be vulnerable. And remember, Jesus doesn't force himself on people. He creates spaces for conversation. He creates spaces for you to really see who he is, for you to really experience the love of the Father in this man, person, holy being of Jesus. As the story continues, it says, he looked up and he said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Now, this could be a bit comedic, isn't it? This right here shows that Jesus might have messed up this miracle pretty badly. Trees? Really? Trees? People do not look like trees. The only trees that I know that walk around are Ents from Lord of the Rings. And trust me, we ain't no, Mordor or whatever it is. We don't live in that time. People do not look like trees. But Jesus didn't mess up. He never messes up. And he's always on point, and he's always on time in what he does. And remember, people weren't used to this kind of authority. The man went from maybe being a skeptic to understanding that this person named Jesus has his best interest at heart. His vision is starting to become clear both physically through a miracle and spiritually. Jesus is opening the man's eyes to seeing something new for the very first time. Do we need to see Jesus in a different way today? Do we need to see who this man is really in our lives? Do we need to have a fresh awakening to seeing who Jesus is in our lives? Slowly, the man is coming to understand that Jesus is different. The man's still confused, but starting to see through this miracle leads us to understand that even if we don't understand who Jesus is or what he's doing in our lives, and that he doesn't give up on us. He doesn't give up on you. He sticks with you. He sticks with me all the way on the journey as we're all on, as we're continuing to walk through this life. Even when we feel like he's finished his work with us, he lives on with us. He walks with us. Jesus enters in and he walks with. He goes with. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were open, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. The next thing that we see is that Jesus' authority doesn't give up, and he stays with us. It doesn't give up on you. It comes back to you. Once again, we see that the man is back in the position of having this authority figure's hands all over him again. He's doing it again. This is the second time that Jesus went back to put his hands intimately on this man's face. This man must have been so used to having people say, "Go, get out of here." But Jesus lovingly came to him and touched him with authority. He came back. Some of the best opportunities I've ever had in life to show people God's love is when I've come back to them. When all those clients at the DI told me, "Zach, get out of here. You're not good enough. You don't love us. You're like everybody else," I continue to come back day after day after day after day. And because of that, I established a beautiful relationship with these people where they could say, "Wow, this guy truly does love us." And that's because of God. That's because of Jesus living in me and through me. They saw something different through me because I came back. And that's what Jesus does. He comes back. Maybe some of the best witnessing opportunities that you might have is going back, or maybe having somebody come back to you. Have you ever had someone come back to you and the feeling of that? Maybe it's been a parent. Maybe you had, your parent leave you and your mom or your dad, when you were quite young, and then later on in life, they finally come back and you reestablish that relationship and you're like, yes, there's restoration there. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe you've had a broken friendship for far too long and you start to mend those relationships and you're like, yes, there's restoration there. Maybe it's a child. Maybe you've had a child turn away from you and say, "I'm leaving you, Mom and Dad," and you don't see them for years, yet they come back and you embrace them and you welcome them in your home, and there's restoration there. Jesus is waiting for us. He wants you to see him with new eyes. Maybe for as much as you know the joy of someone journeying with you, you might actually know the pain of someone not coming back to you as well. Jesus isn't like this, though. He's not like this. He sticks around, and he's continually inviting us back to himself and to be pointed to health and restoration because he has our best interests at heart, not in what we're doing, but in who we are becoming. This miracle is the only one, and I find this fascinating, this miracle is the only one that proceeds in stages. Why is that? Why would this be the only one that proceeds in stages? Because I think God is not limited to a dramatic touch, yet he wants an authentic life of willingness to see him and go to him over and over and over again like a child goes to their father. I can't tell God what he should or should not do and how to do it as much as I would like to do that sometimes. And I know there's pain in this world because I experience it just like everyone else, but I also know that there is a good God. And Jesus isn't just a one-time fix-it guy, even though he can be for certain individuals and for certain situations, yet a lot of the time he just wants to walk with you, and he's constantly telling us to fix your eyes upon him on the journey as we walk together. It's intimate. He goes with us. Are you expecting a dramatic touch in whatever you may be going through currently in your lives? If I can so confidently and boldly encourage you to maybe try looking at it in a new way. Maybe a life of willingness to see Jesus repeatedly working, and the beauty within that leads to a healing that comes through the process of time. God's authority is loving, and it is seen through his son Jesus. And this authority, even though so different, and sometimes we can't even comprehend it, leads us to see God in a new way. Lastly, Jesus sent him home saying, "Don't even go into the village." Jesus' authority knows you individually. Again, I don't know why Jesus didn't send the man back into the village. I don't know. There are other miracles that take place where Jesus does send the person back to tell others what had happened to them, but here he doesn't. But the beautiful thing about this is that there's no miracle that is the same. And this is because Jesus knows what each individual needs, what each individual needs at a certain time. What does it look like? We don't know why Jesus didn't send this man back into his village or his hometown, because we need to fix our eyes upon seeing a new Jesus and considering what we may have known or experienced about him before, and that he changes what he's doing in our lives, because he knows us personally and he knows what you need. And so Jesus wants you to see him and experience him in a new way that will forever change your life, my friends, like it did to the man in the story. Jesus is wanting you and I to come back to him continually so he can care for us with the right intentions through his authority. And so going forward with a new understanding of who Jesus is and how he sees you is very important. And so practically speaking, what can this look like? Well, I want to encourage you to maybe question your questions. And what I mean by that is this: do you struggle with authority? Start asking the question, allow yourself to really dig deep into what's going on inside. Why do I struggle with authority? How do I see Jesus? Is he a mean judge that's always condemning me, looking down at me? Why do I think what I think? Why do I believe that? Where does that come from? Was I hurt by someone in an authoritative space and place, and do I need to find reconciliation with that? Dig deep into what's going on, into how you see and perceive things in your lives. And a good way to do that is actually through community. Find a small group. Do this together. Allow people to speak into your lives. Here at Sheridan Park Family Church, we actually offer small groups. So if you want to get into one and to find a fellowship of community where you can do life together, then come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you about that. As I invite the worship band back up, we're going to close. But in conclusion, the Christian walk is of continually being touched and refreshed by the person of Jesus in an authoritative yet loving way, and dwelling in that and living out of that. Understand that to see God in a new way, you need to allow him to touch and give you new eyes and a new perspective for who he actually is. Not who we think he might be, but who he actually is. Jesus has more for you today, and it's found through an authority over one's life that is accepting, it's intimate, it doesn't give up on you, and it knows you individually. When we come to a place of not just knowing this, yet living in this loving authority, it impacts all areas of our lives. It can also impact those around us and closest to us, which can change our lives forever. Let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for this morning. Lord, continue to work in us. Continue to reveal yourselves, or continue to reveal yourself to who we need to see you as, Lord Jesus. Lord, if I said anything that's not of you, I ask that it just fall away from my friends' ears today. Thank you for your goodness and your kindness to us. Amen.